Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Now, I'm going to give a brief understanding of why I'm so overcritical when it comes to this game in particular, why I'm so heavy on my criticisms, why I don't lay off a lot more when it comes to NetEase, and just a general overall on why I'm still playing the game. So, I did want to quit the game, that is 100% sure. I am only on the game because of my audience, and I believe that I owe it to my audience to keep making content. So I am here purely for my audience. Now, moving on from that fact, let's talk about the game. Why am I so overcritical of developers? Well, you'd have to understand that I am a Cisco CCNP. At one stage, it was called a network professional. Then it turned into another terminology and another terminology. I'm not really concerned with what the CCNP stands for. I'll just say that there is the maximum level I've been able to pass in a test for that particular type of software and development and networking, everything that goes with the computers in that form. I'm also learned in programming. I understand C script, I understand Java, Cobalt. There's like 5 or 6 other type bases that I've learned. I've learned the bases. I've learned how to structure them. I've learned how to manage them, and I've learned how to monitor for them. That's because I functioned on a security base when it came to CCNP, and that is where most of my understanding comes from. All these things, I understand how simple it is to override the security and how easy it is to make sure that things stay within a good guideline, because security developers are generally the people who do most of these works. Now, when it comes to developing a game, by no means is it a very simple task. I'm just going to explain this here as quickly as I can. So, since they're running off a sandbox is just a modular component to your game. Your game has what is called the core. Now, the core is this massive amount of programming. And in case you think a massive amount of programming isn't that difficult, this is about 150,000, maybe 200,000 words. They go and they compile 200,000 words, and this is no simple task because these words come in with commas and apostrophes and hashes and asterisks, and every single type of command on your keyboard is listed into it. And then you have subcategories and base categories and external categories that have to be added to it, and everything gets compiled together to form your core. Now, the core of any game can be variant. For example, Eve has a core which is based off the Sandbox MMO. It's not based off the Sandbox MMO, sorry. They have a core that is based to work with the Sandbox MMO. So the graphics can quickly transfer over to a sandbox. Now, what is so special about a sandbox? A sandbox is an easy modular component. Now, what do I mean by easy modular? Well, all you've got to do is give it a simple base of commands and allow it to access your core. When it accesses your core, it will take in the core information and replicate it into whatever it needs to make. So all of New Eden could have just been generated off a core sandbox interface. But then comes the naming issue. You have to name every single sector. So you need to create a naming program, and that will have to be part of the additions to your core because you're running with the sandbox. So if you know what your game is going to be before you have even started, like if you knew it's going to be a spaceflight MMO, it's going to be 3D, it's going to have non 2D linear non-2D, non-linear restrictions. It's going to have multiple corporations. It's going to have, the complexities of the game. If you iron it out in the start, you can build a very, very strong core. Now, when it comes to your core game is generally what you're going to start the game with. Now, in the term of NetEase, NetEase started off with what we call a beta trial. Now, you get 2 types of trials. You get what is called an alpha trial and a beta trial. Now, the original alpha trials are done with other programmers. You get a group of programmers from the gaming community, and you get a hold of them and you hire them to play your game. And when they play through, they're going to give you this whole list of errors and possible problems within the game, lag issues, error counts. They're going to compile all of this information and they'll hand it over to the company. when they hand it over, the company will now look at everything and they will look at whether it's part of their general code problems or whether it's modular problems. So they go through their code, they analyze, and they work on it. Now, something to note about programming: if it takes 3 months to build the core, it can take 2 months to repair the core. It can take 2 months to edit the core. So it takes a lot of time to fix all of those little problems. And you can't just throw in another line of code into it, because that can alter everything for that entire program. You have to be very careful and very specific about what you're adding. In case anybody thought it was a simple method of Java, because simple Java programming would have you just build your list of commands, and at the bottom you can add the exceptions and the exemptions, and that's it. A core base is quite big. It's quite difficult. When you build a core base, you open out a sideline of programming. Basically, you make what's called a page, or a line set of programs, and you build it out into one program, and this program will then compile in relation to another program, and they will all compile together, and they will have keyword inserts that allows things to draw from the core. And the core has all your interactions. Everything for your game is programmed in this. So basically it's the ones and zeros. And since we're running across the internet and making this a multiplayer internet game, they have to make this here as small as possible. So all of those big core program words have to have keywords, and keywords can't correspond with each other. They have to be different. They have to be coded. So that's what you call coding within the core. So they do all of this, and now they have it, and then they have this code list, and when they're making a module, you call on each of those codes, and that's how you build your modules to add to your game. So let's say, for example, Eve Echoes, they started with our core game. It paired up with the sandbox to generate the graphics. So they had to make sure that they had a sandbox compatible graphics generation core that's within the core, so that it can help generate the graphics. So it gave basic instructions to the sandbox engine, and the sandbox engine will then generate system 1, system 2, system 3. It will start generating the random resources, the anomalies, everything is being spawned in. Then they also have to protect the server loads. So that's another whole aspect to it. This is just me giving a broad spectrum on why I am so critical of them. And right now you can see that I do have a lot of respect for the process, because I do understand the process and I do understand that it's difficult. So they throw in this massive package of work, and that's going to be your modular inserts on the side. Now all of these modular inserts on the side, now these modular inserts will be your additions to the game. So basically you have a ship. Now you want to be able to change the fittings on a ship. You want to have the ship with no fittings, and you want the player to put on fittings. So you develop this little module, and now you put it in. It's going to feed into the core and out to the sandbox. So you need a double interface, or you need a triple interface. All of this had to have been pre-planned before you built the modules. And obviously most games have a multi-layer interface, so you can interface 100 modules to make one interaction. However, when you build those, you have problems within your game like lag and slowing of the game, and conflicts within argument. And this is the whole reason. When you have 100 statements trying to make up for what's happening in one area, because remember, every time you engage a shield, they have to put that into the calculation, and now that server is running through 100 calculations in an instant. The way to stop it is to subdivide the grid. Now this is from a network engineering point of view, and when I say divide the grid, I mean you have to go to your server, and you now have to tell it to share the load with A, B, C, D, E in that same area. So they're going to introduce something like time dilation. Obviously they've gone to the extreme because they're only using a few servers and not a lot of servers, so they can reduce the cost on themselves when they do this. So instead of using 100 servers to generate a single battle, they can use 5 servers, and they can delay it out 20 times longer so that you can actually get your battle going properly. Now, on a single server, they most probably can run an instant calculation of about 100 of these interactions on the spot, because it just goes through the core in the sandbox and it comes out as the finalized product. But when you have too many interfaces interfacing and it's a multi-layer interface, things become difficult, and that's how come we have things like dilation added to the game. Moving forward from that, let's talk about why I get so upset with them. As I said, you have alpha testers, and then you have what's called a beta test. A beta test is where you don't have people who are worried about breaking your game, and they're not worried about the ins and outs of the intricacies. So you have them play in your game and you have them have fun. So you experience the worst case scenario. You overlay your server, you push up the speeds, you do everything at a faster rate, and you find out where your limits are, and that's how you decide what pace your game should have. This year bases yourself on what you have as your available resources, and obviously you can expand it at a later date as you earn more for your game. So that's how you build your core modules, and they now have these little modules that they're adding in. Like when they added the e-war module, it was literally one modular insert into the game. Those modules will take about a week to develop. Unlike the core, they don't take long periods of time, because you just have to read through a list of core information and core calls, as it would be called, and you then link the two together, and that pulls out all of the information on your system. So there you go, that is your basics on developing the first part of the game. Then you move on to the second part of that whole development: bug and error reporting. Now, it's never going to bug and error report on its own, even if you run it through the core on its own. You need the interaction interfaces to give you the error reports. They have what's called coding numbers, or if anybody ever told you it takes a lot of maths to be a programmer, this is where it comes in. Most programmers will never ever get to this point when it comes to a program, but this is something which mainly gamers and high graphics users and high load interface users will run into. When things coincide on the server, you get these little bits of information that are tiny, because you don't want to overbear the player with a gigabyte a second for the connection speed. So you try and make it as small as possible, and this is where the errors come in, because these small little numbers and these small little instructions can coincide with each other. When 10 of them hit the server at the same time, they can create an error number. And when I say error number, I mean, let's say for example, we had a limitation for our sector to be 1,000 players. Obviously, I'm referring to the start of the game. And you have this 1,000 player limit, and it's where your number error limit goes, and everybody tries to jump in. All of a sudden, the server is now trying to figure out who goes through first, who goes through last. It's starting to prioritize, look for lists. It's relisting, it's generating queues. It's doing whatever it can to try and stop this overwhelming urge in this one area. And it's just going to lag like crazy. You can't move, you can't do anything. There you go, it's a simple error. Now all you've got to do to alter it, just to show the ease of fixing it up, is you go back to your program. Now when it comes to fixing a program, just like the core, it can take longer than developing to actually fix it. When it comes to a small problem like this, because you know the math error that's causing it and you know where the problem is directly, you simply go into your program, you open out the listings under that particular limitation, that error report, and then you can expand it. And when you expand it, you can do a temporary expansion. You can give your core module another instruction from a temporary module that you're adding onto it to divert traffic or diversions. That's all that you're going to do for the time being, and then you're going to take a week to rewrite the module, because you already know the problem. It's easier to rewrite than to go and fix that module, even though it would seem simpler from the technical aspect to just fix it, because it's just 5 words in to fix it, while it's 1,000 words to reprogram it. And there's no guarantee that you're getting it 100% perfect with the reprogram, and with the fixing, it just is a whole lot of trial and error. So that is where everybody comes to the problem about understanding why it's so difficult or why it's so easy. Now, this game is modular and it's based off a sandbox, so half of it is very, very simple. Now, why am I calling it modular? because you can see things were added onto the game. They're not part of the direct flow of the game. They added in, they add-ons. Your encounters, you can see that it's an add-on system. Your missions, they're an add-on system. You can see that they simply override a program and they generate themselves. And they're being generated on a single user base. That means that it's not being generated for the server, it's being generated for the player. And when the player interacts with other players to complete a mission, it generates a 3 or 4-man link and they can simply jump in. It's a linking system. So they had simple modules added on. If it was part of the key modules or the core modules of the game, when you open a mission, you'd simply warp into the mission in the middle of a sector and everybody could see that it's going on. Anybody could jump in and join you. That's how I know that it's modular and not part of the core, because if it was part of the core, it's very hard to hide and it will take more of effort to just hide it from you than to build a module. If they did go with it on the core, I would be shocked, because that means they'd have to develop security protocols and sub protocols, and the size of our game doesn't make sense anymore. And I did criticize them on the size of the game, because even with the way that I'm expressing, you didn't have to build such large modules for the player interface. You could have used your core module calls and built smaller modules for the interface for the player. Similar basics, because your phone as a basic device calls on the Java core, and your Java core bases on your level of your Android's software. So if your software is 8.1, you have an 8.1 core. You have so many features, so many updates they can call on. If you have a 10, you have so many updates, so many features. It's an easy call. All right, so that's the basics on why I'm saying it's so simple. Now, once you pass that 6 months of initial phase, you have things called add-ons in the form of core expansions. Now, core expansions will be something like the Indomitable update that came out. Now, this isn't just a modular expansion. This adds to the baseline of the game. It alters the base. So basically, it links into the core. It's a core expansion. Now, these take some time to build. They'll take like about a month as well. And once they are done, you just simply lock them on and they're going to expand. So that's how come those things seem so difficult. But if you are catching my drift, it only takes a month to build a core for an expansion. And unlike the original core, which only one person generally works on, you could have a team of 3 or 4 people who have a ironed out example, and they'll create key areas one by one as they go through the list, and that's one of the ways they can do it. All right, so moving on to why I'm so critical. When it comes to these major parts of the game, and when it comes to the gameplay and moving forward with expansions and communities and everything with the game, things aren't all that difficult. Modules are quite simple, as I said. So 1 week thing to make a module, and if you have 10 programmers, you could break it up into 2 teams, 5-man team for expansions, 5-man team for modules. That means 5 modules a week. Now, yeah, I know what you're thinking. 5 modules isn't all that much. It's not going to add. No, it makes a big difference. 5 a week means in 4 weeks they have 20 modules. That means they could change the game 20 times in that small period. Something like Indomitable, all of the updates they're going to add to our game are just these small little tidbits. They're literally making these small little modules and they're adding it on, and they're just calling the baseline code and they rescripting it, or they rescripting something else from the game, unless they went with the total regeneration and are going to put on a subcore. Now, a subcore is what you'd call a major patch. A major patch is when they're going to do this massive maintenance. They're going to put on this patch onto the game. It's going to affect everything in the game. They have to run a compilation. It goes throughout the servers. It installs. Then they give us a compilation patch to alter our core module to effectively communicate with the server. And it affects everything. Everybody is changed over to the new module. And then you can play the game efficiently again. Now, with all of that said, if they are working it on a 5 by 5 team, the five who do all of the big updates, they can do every 3 months a massive core. And when I say a massive core, I mean a core as big as the game each 5 months. So, sorry, not 5 months, every 3 months. And with five of them, they could make five core updates at a time. So they could add Indomitable, Dreadnoughts, Arenas. You get what I'm saying? Five every single month. They just have to restart their scripting. It does take a lot of knowledge to get there, and obviously if you can work with a big company like this, you are at that knowledge level, so you obviously have the skill. So 1000 hours, 2000 hours, easy peasy, you're getting through it like there's no tomorrow. Then you move on to the harder steps of the programming, and that's bug fixing. Bug fixing can take forever. I don't really blame them for trying to fix bugs, but when they try to implement changes to bugs and it seems like they're giving more bugs, I'm really critical on it, because you already know what you're adjusting. Because you can see the program lines, it takes a very lazy programmer to alter a program incorrectly, and I'm about to be honest about it. If you had something as simple as the game and you wanted to slow down rats, for example, you're simply going to go and you're going to put a limiter on that entire module. Remember, as I said, it's not as simple as this for most cases, but you're just going to throw a limiter. That is a simple, quick, and easy patch. However, when it translates through, it's going to have other effects because you just threw in a quick word. So that's lazy patching. If you're going to do it properly, you're going to go in, you're going to find the code for your rats, you're going to find all of your terminology, all of your parameters, and you're going to add in a limiting parameter to it. The limiting parameter will be part of their substructure. It will go into the core. The core will then translate it as the core feature, and it will then be pushed out as the overall perspective. They're going to have to do it for each and every form of rat that there is in the game, and I think that might be something they don't want to do, because that will mean they're going to have to do the 5 subsections, and then they're going to have to do all of the mission sections and all of their small little parties. So it will be like 6 or 7 times they have to run through the code just to find each party and give them the limiters. So with all of that, you now have your game limited down. And when they sneak in patches like re-putting in the speed, that means that somebody might have done the lazy method at the bottom and it affected the entire game. But that's not 100% true, because you can tell from the way that everything was running that things were 100% correct in the first week and things started to change as they went through. That's because they've been tweaking the game on the side. They've been interfering with the module without telling us they're interfering with it. They may have tweaked the resistance of ships, and they may have tweaked the skills that players are allocated, and things like that. They have a big difference. They can't keep the rats at 100% skill, because that makes them too powerful. And obviously that's where it went, and things are all over the place. I'm not going to get into it too far on that side. So those are all of the basics that go into building the game. And the reason why I'm so critical of NetEase is every time I see an error that's negligence, or error that's just, by the way, I've skipped something, or by the way, we're doing this here, it has this effect, and you read it and you think about it logically, because by the way, programming is all logical, so you already can see all the errors, and you have to be very logical about your error. Like stopping the bots with the contract reduction makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. You're stopping transaction capability. You look at your overall gameplay. If you have more bots than players, yes, it does make sense. If you don't have more bots than players, you made absolutely no sense. You just interfered with your game player base. So that's how come I instantly will slam at NetEase at this point. In the start of the game, I was a little bit more on the leeway side because they experienced the mass numbers. I think it took me almost 2 months before I started firing off at them heavy. And that was because they implemented bad changes. At which point I started criticizing. When I started criticizing, sorry, when I started criticizing, it started having bigger effects. And as the effects got bigger and bigger, it started to have a larger and larger cascade effect until we ended up with a small little group of people who experienced all the problems within the game. So that's the basics. That's everything you need to know about why I'm as critical as I am and where my critical nature comes from. I have done some development. I don't like doing development, so if you're ever going to wonder if I'm going to develop a game or anything crazy like that, no, there's not a chance. I hate the idea of doing it. It's too long, it's too tedious. I'm not an expert programmer in that sense. I can't do the 3 months of programming. I can do the scripting of your basic outlines, but I don't have any time or patience to build a game. And that's just the reality about who's behind this channel. So I hope that you all do enjoy, and I hope you all now understand why I go so heavy at NetEase when there's an error in the game, and why I'm so overcritical of them and not so overcritical of, say, for example, the bots. Because the bots are something you're not going to stop anytime soon. Let's put it this way. There's a primary system for bots where you build a macro and you run it. Then there's a secondary system where you force a bunch of people to do things for you. And there's no way you can stop either one. Building the bots, you can make a bot that reacts like a person. It's as simple as the modular game control flow plans. Because when a player is lazy, when a player is aggressive, they're going to change from time to time. All you've got to do is have a dialing system on your program, and it will swap randomly between 3 or 4 different modes of play. And the algorithm is all off all of a sudden. So that's how come it's almost impossible to stop bots permanently. So I hope you all do enjoy. Remember to subscribe to my channel, leave a like, comment down below, and hopefully next time you'll understand where I go with my arguments.